Thanks for tuning in to Already Not Yet, the podcast where we engage questions of the Bible, theology, ministry, politics, and beyond, all through the lens of kingdom theology. Whatever the topic, our aim is to explore how the reality of God's kingdom transforms the way we think, speak, and live. Enjoy.
Have you heard of Robin Perry?
No, the name doesn't ring a bell, but
Preston Sprinkle did a book on the 4 views of hell. I think it was like no hell at all, Christian Universalism, Nihilism, and ECT. And the guy that did the Christian Universalism passage or part, I think his name was Robin Perry. I think that's his name. And he just had the guy on his podcast recently, and he had the guy give his like broad overview of Christian Universalism. And I'm not a Christian Universalist, but man, it was pretty compelling, especially because like the way he drew on kingdom theology and talked about God's ultimate, everything's moving towards new creation and all that. It was like,
there's a,
it was pretty compelling
within Calvinism. And you're not far away from, if you like really buy into the doctrine of the elect, then you're not too far away from claiming that, well, all people are elect.
Right.
Because if God wills for all men to be saved, then that there is no arguing with the word all. And so if God's willed all people to be saved, then he's made a way for all people to be saved. And so within the vein of Christian Universalism is really like a progression of going from a doctrine of the elect to all are elected, and so what's the point really of choosing salvation?
And it's funny because he made the point that he said, some years I'm an Arminian and some years I'm a Calvinist, because either one works.
It does.
Because for the Arminian take would be people freely choose to reject God, and then of course in hell they eventually repent, and they freely choose to embrace God. And so I found that hilarious, that someone can make that debate so inconsequential to them, where that's like something that really divides almost every Christian. I was like, wow,
yes, it does.
That makes Christian Universalism even more appealing. Not that I still think annihilationism is the best take.
But
I will say
most logical.
Yeah, I will say that like, I think if you asked someone to give like, not just talking about individual scriptures, but like R.T. Francis, but like give like a broad theological framework for annihilationism, incorporate creation, incorporate the cross, atonement, all that. And then you did the same with Christian Universalism. I kind of feel like the latter would be more compelling, just because, I mean, what sounds more in line with new creation? Annihilationism or Christian Universalism? Now that's one isolated.
Restoration of all things.
Yeah, the restoration of all things, right.
That word all is hard to argue with.
Yep. Some people try to argue it.
It's like, well,
some are like, all means some in this context.
Yeah. Some of all.
Yeah, it's one of those words that just, it's all encompassing. You can't get away from it. All.
Yeah.
I thought it was crazy in that podcast, Preston, I think he basically said he thinks there's more biblical backing for Christian Universalism than for eternal conscious.
Yeah, that was, he did say that, which was like,
wow.
That was pretty bold. I mean, because he wrote the book with Francis Chan on ECT, back in the day.
The both of them.
So he's really deconstructed there. All right, well, shall we talk about politics?
Let's do it.
Hell and politics.
We've already talked about hell, so we'll talk about politics.
We'll squeeze a few more hot button issues in here.
Yeah, so Caleb's super excited you're on our podcast.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, man. And Caleb and I have been friends for a while now, and every time there's a Vineyard Pastors event, we usually find ourselves off to the side at some point having some kind of theological, political conversation. And I've always said that last hour should have just been a recorded podcast. And so here we are. We get to do it now.
Really good. It's really good content.
which is awesome. So yeah, Caleb, I'll let you tell a little bit more about yourself, but I'll say that I specifically asked you, and when Jordan, I specifically thought you'd be the right person to talk about this topic, how a Christian should engage in politics. Not only just from our conversations, but I think you're probably from what I can tell, most well-read pastor I know in this area on this subject. And I think you've just spent a lot of time really thinking deeply about it. And so that's why I wanted you to come on and do it. But can you just tell us a bit about your background, your current ministry, and how you came to be interested in the topic of politics, and more specifically, how a Christian ought to engage in politics?
So I'm the senior pastor of the Dayton Vineyard. I am the son of the founding pastor of that church. Tell people, I kind of joke with people tongue in cheek that I've been in ministry for 42 years. But now I've actually been pastoring now for 20 years. Wow. And I can't believe it's been 20 years, but I'm leading the Dayton Vineyard, and that's pretty much my context. But what's got me interested in this subject really was, I think it was the book of Ephesians. There's something that underlies just in the book of Ephesians that Paul is trying to make a bigger point than kind of some of the points that people take away from the book. And it's basically that there are these forces at work in the world that are at work influencing culture, influencing Christians, which is kind of weird because when you think like, could Christians be influenced by powers of darkness? Because he's writing about all of these powers of darkness, and he tells us to stand against them. But he kind of writes this like there's this force that's kind of pushing culture in a direction it shouldn't be going. And it seems like he's writing to the church to stand against them. And if you sort of believe, well, these powers have no effect on Christians, or they should have no effect on Christians, and you have to kind of ask yourself the question, why did he write the letter in the first place?
Right.
Right. So what really got me interested in the subject was the book of Ephesians, but also, going back almost 20 years into, the second Bush term. Yeah. I noticed that there was a rise in political engagement and even spiritual influencing of elections, particularly, right-wing politics. And I started wondering back in, 2007, 2008, probably about the time that Barack Obama became the candidate for the 2008 presidential election. And I noticed that there was some significant pushback within Christian circles, and a lot of it was spiritual in nature. And I just thought, is this really this seems new to me, because in the 90s, growing up in the 90s, I didn't necessarily notice that type of stuff. I wasn't aware of it. And I became more hyper aware. Like every conference I went to for, 2006 to 2012 and then onward had some sort of political edge to it.
Wow.
And as a pastor's kid, I've been to a lot of conferences, a lot of conferences. And I don't remember conferences in the 90s having this sort of dynamic. And so to me, it felt really, really new. And then as I sort of observed what was happening within the Christian circle, and I began to study the book of Ephesians, I was like, I feel like there's something going on here, that this is just novel in the church. And so that's kind of how I became, interested in the whole thing. I just kind of been a cultural observer. I'm kind of skeptical of politics. Well, I'm not kind of. I am skeptical of politics. I sort of just look at the whole political scene as just kind of like a bystander who's just, casting judgment. And I'm like, let's just think critically about what it is that you're saying. And so I've just always been that type of person. But I think in the last, since 2016, I think what I noticed in the early 2000s was just continuing to ramp up and become more intense. And so that's what's got me into the subject. And yes, I've read quite a bit on the subject. I read a lot about presidential, I read a lot of presidential biographies, historical context. I'm a kind of a student of history in that regard. And so when it comes to, the presidential elections of my lifetime, I've definitely taken notice and can talk about the dynamics pretty extensively.
Yeah. So
that's kind of how I got into the subject. It's sparked a lot of really great conversations between you and I. Because I'm kind of I'm just a pushback. Let's just push back against this thought. So, which unnerves a lot of people because within political streams, the right and the left, there very much is a let's go with the flow of the party.
Right.
And I'm like, well, let's not necessarily go with the flow of the party. Let's push back against that thought.
Yeah. Can I say this real quick? So I think you and I are about 8 years apart in age. Are you 42? Is that?
I am 42.
Yeah. So I'm 34.
Wow.
And I got interested in Trump Hillary.
Oh,
so exactly 8 years later,
right,
is when you said, and so at the same age. So wait, I guess I was 26 then.
Yeah.
So that's just interesting,
So that would have been your second presidential election, right?
I voted. My first vote was Obama and
Mitt Romney.
And Mitt Romney. No, it was McCain.
Was it John McCain?
Yeah. So I was
Palin.
Yeah. Yep. So I was born in 90. So that was 2008. So I was able to vote. Yeah.
So that election is where I first noticed the prophecy factor.
Oh, really?
Because there was a number of prophets that had come out and said that they had seen Sarah Palin and they'd seen a special anointing on her, and that McCain was there. This was the prophecy that McCain was going to die in office, and that she was anointed to be president.
No way. Wow.
And I just thought, you're prophesying someone's death.
Right.
Is that really the prophetic? Is that really what the mandate is for the prophetic? And I don't see that in the New Testament. So, again, that's where I push back.
Right.
So that was a very interesting election. That's where my ears began to sort of peak, and I'm not sure that. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I think we're opening up something that we shouldn't be opening up.
Yeah.
Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it did.
Wow. Yeah. Go back a step here. You said you read a lot of biographies and historical stuff. Do you have a favorite time period or person to study? Not Jesus.
Not Jesus. I mean, Jesus is definitely a fascinating
He's up there. He's
figure.
top five for sure.
I've spent a good portion of my life at this point studying Jesus. I actually find the 20th century to be one of the most advanced centuries as far as presidential politics and even church, all things church. I mean,
really?
Basically from Azusa Street forward to the present, there have been so many pretty dramatic, call them progressions within Christian theology and practice, as well as the political realm. And so I think as the church is kind of advancing into the 21st century, politics is also advancing into new heights. I mean, that's where, in the early 20th century, we saw the president of the United States take on way more political power than he ever had. Mm-hmm. And so you saw that with Teddy Roosevelt and, subsequent administrations where they just began to seize power. And now with the current administration, seeing an unprecedented level of power seizure.
Wow.
And it's supported by the Supreme Court now, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah. So we're going to hold that thought because we're going to hit on hot button issues at some point.
Great.
But before we get to that, it might be helpful can you just sketch what your political theology might be? And let me just define that for listeners, what you think the Bible says about how a Christian should think about, participate in, and identify in regards to politics. Yeah.
So the core of my theology is centered around man is living in the image of God. Mm. We can't divorce ourselves from the image of God, but we can actually take on, let's call it different images. We can make ourselves into the likeness of political figures, even media figures, actors and different, personalities throughout the world. So we can take on those images. But at the core of our being is actually we're created as image bearers in the likeness. Genesis 1:27, we're created in the image and the likeness of God. And what that truly means is that my very life is to reflect the character and the nature of God. Mm-hmm. Not just his image, but it's his character living through me. And so that has implications with how I live in the world. And politically, that has implications on how I interact with other people on a political plane or a political plateau or scale or whatever you want to say. So what that means is that my highest priority as a political person living in America in the 21st century is how do I engage in the political scene and still faithfully represent God's image to the world.
Mm, so good.
And so that's going to affect how I talk. That's going to impact what I think about people who disagree with me politically. That's going to impact how I engage with my neighbors on the subject. Because at every level, I'm a reflection of God's character and his nature. And my job and my responsibility in this world is to care for creation as he's cared for creation. Mm. That's the responsibility of being an image bearer. So politically, what that means is I think caring for creation is one big aspect of being an image bearer. That was part of our original mandate, was to care for creation.
And are you speaking to environmental?
So environmentally, I think that the way some political perspectives just perceive environmental, things like climate change and how to care for the planet, and whether we should drill oil, and whether or not we should harvest all of the minerals of the earth just for our gain, that impacts. So my perspective, my theology impacts really what it is that I think what we should do as people who are caring for the planet. I don't think we should violate the planet. I don't think we should, violate creation for the sake of human advancement. or destroy creation, because we're supposed to be stewards
Right.
of creation.
And some people might quibble with you over climate change, but like I'm sure everyone can agree, like plastic in the ocean is not a good thing.
We have an island
You know?
in the Pacific Ocean. How big?
Right or left?
Plastic.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Great Plastic Reef, I think is what they call it.
Oh my gosh.
That's not caring for creation.
Yeah.
As a person who is created in the image of God, as a person who has been blessed from the beginning of all creation to care for all of creation, means that I ought to, that pile of plastic out there ought to concern me.
Yeah, that's good.
And I don't think that many people connect those two dynamics, that
Right.
we are carers of creation, not just our fellow man, but also our world that we've been given to steward.
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of it. So on a ecological perspective, I think we have to do some things that cause us to break with particular political ideologies. But also, I think in terms of caring for my fellow man, caring for my neighbor, that has a political implication as well.
Yeah.
Because I am reflecting God's character and nature to the people who don't know Him, and so that will have an implication and an effect on how I treat people, and in particular, the language that I use.
Mm-hmm.
I think politically, it's too easy to attach ourselves to the language of our political leaders without actually thinking about what does this mean for the people who are also created in the image of God,
Yeah.
who we're called to and blessed to care for as part of God's creation.
Yeah.
And so that's the core of my political theology, is that we're created in the image of God, and all things political, we have to represent the person of Christ. We have to represent the fact that we are physical, living, breathing examples of God's character and nature.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. As you were sharing, some would be tempted to already start to peg you, like,
Oh yeah,
like, the, ecology that's left, and, caring for your neighbor. I mean, I think honestly, like, I know you, I know that would include both leftist and some leaning causes. But then also I've been, just stuff I was reading today for a particular message I'm doing here at my church. Like the body, like our physical bodies being in it, in the image of God as well, and like, not disregarding our bodies as, insignificant shells of the internal, which the particular author I was reading was critiquing the LGBTQ, specifically transgender ideology in that light,
Is that Carl Truman?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Great book.
Was it Strange New World?
I actually read the longer one, Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Yeah. So, yeah, it was Truman.
I think his last chapter is a worthwhile read, because I kind of expected him to go into the nature of, a culture war engagement, and he really kind of hammers it down and like, no, actually, we're not to engage in culture wars. We're to reflect God's image.
Does he in Brave New World or Strange New World? Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
and
awesome.
I thought, that's a really good call for the church. Because most of his thesis is sort of kind of anti the cultural moment.
Yeah,
but calling the church back to a peaceful existence of bearing God's image to the world That's who we are.
Wow, that's cool. He doesn't go into that as much in Rise and Triumph. Wow, okay. That's cool.
It was really great. So, I'm getting. Some people are going to be like, "Oh wait, what side of the aisle?" And my goal, and this is one of the things that you ask any person in my church, they're gonna go, "I have no idea where he stands."
Goals.
They call me the third rail
mission
walker
from now on.
They're just the guy that walks the third rail. Yes, I do, very tightly.
Oh man,
because I can find flaw in, and this is where I just was a skeptic. I can find flaw in every political system out there.
Yeah,
and every political system does the same thing as far as religious voters, is they play the Jesus card, and I'm like. I'm not really sure as a practical theologian. I'm not really sure that Jesus would be finding himself in agreement with that statement.
Yeah,
but that's what they want to do. They want to use Jesus to influence my vote in their direction. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've already started to talk about this, but I'm just curious. What pitfalls do you see in how American Christians engage in politics today? And I would definitely love to hear, because you've already alluded to it, maybe on the left and the right. Sure. What are maybe some of the unique pitfalls you see? So yeah,
I think one of the biggest pitfalls that we face on the left and the right is surrounding the issue of immigration. On the left, it seems like there's a drive towards having no immigration policy at all, just except for open borders.
Right.
And I don't agree that you can be a sovereign nation and not have a border. And I don't think that having no immigration policy at all is good policy.
Yeah.
I actually think it's poor policy. I think it's poor management of the government to not have certain policies that implicate immigration. But on the right, I think the immigration issue is sort of a reductionist approach where you're just reducing flesh and blood people to just a mass dehumanized state. And that's concerning to me, really concerning, because they're not.
Yeah.
They're not people.
Yeah.
During the last election, the most recent one, there was a number of posts, memes that were being shared by high-profile Christian people, as well as low-profile Christian people that were making light of the Haitian immigrants.
Right.
And there was all sorts of jokes about people in that community. And that community is 25 minutes from my church.
Wow.
And I know pastors in those communities that are loving and caring for those people. And I'm just like, this doesn't represent those people. And what it does is it actually classifies them as a risk to our community.
Yeah.
And I just, that goes into that language thing. If we're not careful with the language that we use, then we find ourselves in, complicity with dehumanization.
Yeah.
And, interestingly enough, if you look at Exodus chapter 1, the Pharaoh's war against the Israelites started with him dehumanizing them. He uses language of, these people are a threat against us.
Wow.
We need to do something. We need to act shrewdly. And that's, I just go, well, wait a second. Now that went from a light sort of, we need to enslave them. Well, that's not a light thing, but
right.
it reads like propaganda.
Yeah.
And it went from a propaganda type of statement against the Israelites to infanticide.
Wow.
Really, really fast within 8 verses. And that's the plot of Exodus 1, if there is a plot. But I think that's the type of thing that we just have to be careful of as believers, wherever we lie, is that we're not finding ourselves in agreement with our political party as far as how they're treating a group of people, but also not taking a sort of on the other side, just a passive approach and just saying, well, we're going to let it be. Right. Because both of those, like one side is just going to create more chaos, and the other side is just going to reduce a group of people to animals.
Yeah.
And once you dehumanize people, you can do all sorts of atrocities.
Yeah.
That's consistent throughout human history.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. What do you, I'm sure we'll get to more kind of, I guess, practical stuff later, but like, how do you, I'm sure no one at your church reposted any of those memes or, like,
what do I do as a pastor?
Yeah. How do you start to walk with people through that and address that with your body?
So I never sort of like go, okay, I'm going to target this thing on Sunday, but I do speak to the broader issues. I don't speak to the molecule, because it's only potentially a small handful of people who are actually doing that. Mm-hmm. So I try and rise above that issue. Like, okay, let's just not talk about the behavior towards, the Haitian immigrants. Let's actually just talk about caring for people as a whole, whether we agree or disagree, or no matter where they come from. Scripture calls us repeatedly to, care for our neighbor within the biblical context. Leviticus 19. Foreigners are named right next to our neighbor.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so you can't divorce the context of the foreigner or the sojourner in your land from your neighbor. They are one and the same thing.
Yeah.
And it is actually part of participation in God's holiness. That's one of the things that I think most people don't really see within Leviticus 19, is that the head verse is, "Be holy, for I am the Lord your God, who is holy."
Right.
And then throughout the whole passage, there's a repetition that's happening where there's a command and a reminder of the holiness of God. And so I would speak to the larger issue that when we care for people as God cares for people, we are participating actually in his holiness and his character.
Wow. That's good. Yeah, I know when I go to have a conversation like that with someone in my church, it's really helpful to be more of that like political outsider standing off and condemning, or not condemning, sometimes condemning, judging and being suspicious and skeptical. I love how Preston Sprinkle says being like an exile in Babylon, because I think that if you don't prove yourself to them to be able to not just be bought and sold by one of the sides, it's like you can't say anything, like you are a completely untrustworthy source, and just because of the way that our politics have to the place that they've gotten to,
Right.
So I find it being able to find common ground, and if it's about language, like dehumanizing rhetoric around unauthorized immigrants, it's helpful to be like, so like, I'm not for open borders like you just did, I'm not saying that we shouldn't monitor our borders. I'm not even saying we should never deport people, right?
That's right.
But like, let's talk about this other side of the issue now, where we don't need to we also don't want to give the impression that 90% of unauthorized immigrants are violent criminals who are smuggling drugs. And I mean, I was talking to a guy once who was convinced that 90% of unauthorized immigrants are directly connected with the cartel.
Yes.
And I was like, where did he get that belief? Like, he had to have gotten that from
that's a political
somewhere.
Talking point.
It's a political talking point. And so I think some have accused me of saying, like, well, it's an unfounded fear. People aren't going to take statements to the extreme you think they are. But I mean, I've seen it myself, so.
Yeah, I think trying to find that middle ground between, sound policy, and fair treatment of people.
Yeah. Especially in that issue.
I think as believers, one of the things like we ought to do is when we recognize our political leaders using that type of rhetoric, we ought to speak out against them. I mean, that's another one of those things like, hey, I'm for sound, immigration, a sound immigration policy. I think, it's not unreasonable to deport people, but I think we ought to do it in a humane way.
Yeah.
Really, we are a civilized society. We shouldn't be treating people like we're uncivilized. And that's one of the things that I think N.T. Wright actually does in his most recent book with Michael Bird, is that he says the common activity within the political arena for Christians is to practice our civics in an uncivil fashion.
Wow.
And I love that because I've adopted that. Like, let's just be civil in our civics. Let's act like we're actually developed human beings,
right? Rational
human beings. Let's not be irrational. Let's not be angry. Let's not be mistreating other people.
Yeah,
and that's for some people though that's a bridge too far.
Civility.
In 2016, it was so funny. Was it 2016? Yeah, it was 2020. It was. There's so many posts out there. There was such an extreme rhetoric that anybody who was not voting according to your political bent was a demon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you should just annihilate the demon. And I'm like, when did Jesus ever do that?
You're right.
Like, let's just be clear. Our neighbors are not demons.
Yeah.
They're just not. That's anybody who disagrees with us politically they're not demonized. They just have a different opinion. And that's actually somebody that we're called to love, not take up arms against. It's that, Ephesians chapter 6, we battle not against flesh and blood.
Mm-hmm.
So our neighbor next door who has the sign that is in opposition to my sign, if I had a sign, I don't have a sign. Again, I always like to leave people wondering. But they're not my enemy.
Yeah.
And according to the Bible, if they were my enemy, then guess what? They're now my friend because I have to love them.
You got to love them.
I'm commanded to love my enemy. So going out front and yelling, that they're demonized is not loving them.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
What do you think is like or just talk a little bit about what you think the source of some of this stuff might be? Like, I just... thinking of like Facebook stuff or whatever. I mean, people treat Facebook like a private diary that is unfiltered, and the email I didn't mean to press send on, except they do.
Yeah,
and it's like people that are otherwise loving and kind. It's just like
good-hearted people. They just sort of lose all. Inhibition.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the like what makes otherwise civilized people?
I think tribalism is one of the things that drives that. I think one of the long-standing schemes of the enemy is to tribalize humanity. Let's separate them. And Facebook is very good at taking me, who or the average Joe, who's out there like wanting to be seen and be heard amongst a group of people who are going to agree with him. And so I think tribalism is at its core of driving that. Like, I'm going to post something that is extreme and fits my community, and so therefore I'm going to post this, and I'm going to get likes, and I'm going to get people who agree with me, and I'm going to feel legitimized. And I think some of that, just even tribalization is just funded or fueled by anger. I think that's something that isn't really often talked about, is that a lot of what's fueling the current political moment that we're in is an anger, an underlying anger that has not been dealt with by people. And so they need to speak out. They need to voice their anger. And so Facebook is just the place to do that. Yeah. But it's also the place where I'm going to get likes by my community. People who agree with me. Yeah. And that's what the algorithm does. The algorithm, if you have a certain perspective, if you've liked political posts and I post something that's political and you've liked something along the same lines, my post is going to show up in your feed. Yeah. But it may not show up in your feed. And that's just the way Facebook works. It just sort of divides people. Yeah.
And the outrage makes a lot of money.
It sure
for
does.
People. And so media company, they have a vested interest in keeping the outrage going.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Yeah. I've never done it, but I've thought about it. You should look sometime. You see somebody's political post, and how close to that post do you see an advertisement for something? My guess is that it's pretty close. Yeah. It's like, you saw somebody that is, within your worldview, and now here's an advertisement for name the brand.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. There's a monetization going on.
Yep, absolutely. So what would be your thoughts on the left-right divide today? Specifically, how would you use the ethic of Jesus and the kingdom to critique the left, and how would you use it to critique the right?
Oh, that's a good question. So, the kingdom is Christocentric. It's gospel-centric. And I think in terms of that, living it, if that is, the kingdom is Christocentric and gospel-centric, then living as a kingdom citizen is embodying those types of things. Mm-hmm. So as a critique of the left and the right, it really is what doesn't fit within the gospel-shaped life. Mm-hmm. What doesn't fit in humility. Take but Philippians chapter 2, right? Consider whatever you do, whether word and deed, do it all in the name. Was that right? No, that's not right.
Do nothing from selfish ambition.
That's right. Do nothing selfish ambition and humility, right? So take on the nature of Christ. And so that's what I think, as far as critiquing the left and the right, what is the nature and the character of Christ, and what doesn't fit inside of that? And it's pretty obvious what begins to emerge is it's, both parties are about power and control, greed, self-service, status, maintaining more power. And those are the things politically, the lack of care for humanity. I think all of those things sort of emerge as like, oh, that's that's where my Christianity or my Christ-likeness differs from my political party. And after that, it's the question of, can you justify or reconcile the things that you don't agree with the things that you do agree with? And from there, I actually think that just comes down to policy. Who is going to have the better policy, and who has the better vision for America? What type of world do I want to live in, and what type of world do I want to leave my kids and my grandkids? So those are the things that I think, cause us to analyze our political spectrum according to Christ, shed the things that aren't Christ. I'm going to live as Christ in the world. And whose vision for America can I get behind?
Yeah. Do you agree with, I think I've heard it commonly said, the right has better personal ethics and morality. The left has better social ethics and morality.
I don't know about that anymore.
Yeah, true.
I mean, that's one of the interesting dynamics of the present age of politics, especially when it comes to Christian circles, is the issue of character. Mm-hmm. And now we find the mainstream of Christian voters are saying character doesn't matter.
Right. Complete reversal.
Which is a complete reversal of the Clinton era. And that's like, okay, so and I think it's Caitlin Chess that said it very well, that your politics has become an idol when you sacrifice the nature and the character of Christ for winning. And I think that's one of whatever's happened in the last 20 years with our politics, is that the cost has become so high that we're willing to do anything to get victory.
Yeah.
And that's caused us to sort of rethink what we see as being some sort of moral authority. And I don't think that on the right anymore there's any type of moral authority. I'm not sure the left has ever had a moral authority, but whatever moral authority the right did have, they've lost it.
Wow.
And I think that's just evidenced by let's just say, some of the behavior of the politicians on the right and the overlooking. And this is, I go back to what I had said. We need to become better at speaking up when we see something we don't agree with. Mm-hmm. If to the right, the Christian voting bloc is a vital part of their voting base. We've let the people who have no hope or no intention of bearing Christ's image to the world dictate to us what we agree with. And I think that as voters, we should just go, hey, I don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. That's not according to my personal value. And if you think you're courting me as a voter, you're not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We disagree. We want better.
Yeah.
And I think we should expect better from our politicians. I actually think that we, as Americans, as a whole, left and right, we actually expect too little.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So how do you participate? Or what would you recommend to someone who's like, I don't know, I can't think of any of the titles, but there's the I'm just totally on the outside observing versus, I'm knocking on doors saying, are you familiar with the Democratic ticket.
So I think the best way for us to institute change actually starts at the local level.
Yeah.
I think the things that are really going to impact every believer's day-to-day life actually happens more at the local and state level than it does at the federal level. And my evidence for that is 20 years of voting. Every 4 years, I'm told two things. One, that this is the most crucial election of our lifetime. I mean, think about how many times you've heard that.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
and 15 years of voting, right?
Every time.
So every time, this is the most crucial election of our lifetime. We got to get out to vote. And the second thing is, empty promises. They've been talking about border security, immigration policy, welfare reform, tax reform, health care, and nothing has gotten better. Mm-hmm. Nothing. They've been talking about these issues for the last 20 years, plus years, actually. I remember in the 90s, Bob Dole and Jack Kemp, when they were running, they came to our school on the issue of vouchers. They were running on vouchers for private education.
Wow.
And that's an issue that we're still having a conversation about. Yeah. And you're telling me in 30 years we haven't been able to move the needle?
Right.
And I remember when Bob Dole and Jack Kemp came to our school, and I started let's watch the debates, right? And I remember the primary. They were talking about in the primary season. They were talking because Pat Buchanan was one of the candidates. This is my history. Pat Buchanan was one of the candidates, and he was talking about building a wall on the southern border. And so now for 30 years we've been talking about this, and nobody's done anything. And we, for the last 15 years now, we've been talking about healthcare reform in our nation, and nothing has happened. And so the first thing is that we're told this is the most crucial election of our time. But then the second thing is we're given a list of things that we're going to make improvements on, but they don't actually make improvements on. Mm-hmm. And my skeptical side says is that they're not making improvements, because if they solve these issues, then they have nothing to convince me to vote for them again next time. So I think the change back to your question, the change that we want to see in the world really begins at the local level. It begins with our city, engaging in our city politics, engaging for local reforms, advocating for local nonprofits and programs that help the marginalized and the poor, that create more of a fair and just society locally. And then at the state, I think we can make a lot of the states are, they say 50 little test labs are the states, advocating for sound policy at the state level. And they want to say that the federal is like the most, important thing that we do or we vote for. And I just, the evidence suggests otherwise. They're really not in the business of making our lives as American citizens any better.
So, so much. I pretty much agree with everything you just said, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. So, obviously, two questions. One, I'll just start with the very last thing you said. Policies have driven up inflation, right?
Yep.
So, federal policies are having a very felt impact on the average just American. And so does that what does that tell us about our concern and care for federal politics? I'll just start with that, and then I want to ask one more devil's advocacy type question.
Well, I think let's just talk about the current moment.
Yeah.
Right? Where suddenly everything that's coming into this country has a tariff on it.
Right.
How long is it going to take to change that policy? That's 4 years from now. Mm-hmm. And that's even if, there's a change in party. The earliest it can be 2 years.
Yeah.
But that's if, the midterm elections swing the Republican or the House and the Senate back in the other direction. But if history is an indicator of what's to come, then the moment that newly elected Democratic Senate and House take office, the first thing that they're going to do is an investigation. Which is why I just sort of go back, okay, if we're going to, there's economic policy that is coming from Washington that affects all citizens of the United States. But again, we really don't have a whole lot of control into that, because every time that there's been a swing back in the other direction of the House and the Senate, one of the first things both parties do is launch investigations.
Right.
And so, again, as my skepticism is, they're really not in the business of making our lives better. Mm-hmm. They're in the business of keeping power.
Yeah.
And that's, as believers, it's just got to go, look, you're wanting our vote, but you're not stewarding our vote the way you should be stewarding our vote.
Yeah.
Because you're squandering what it is that we give you, and we're allowing it to happen.
Right. Speaking of votes, let me hit you with this. What do you think it's a civic responsibility for Christians to vote? Should we always be voting for president, federal level? What's your perspective on that?
I think if we are abdicating our vote, we're just saying I'm not going to vote, then what we're doing is we're giving up our voice and even our potential to speak into and steward something that actually, if God has placed the governing authorities over our lives, and as believers we're called to honor the governing authorities that He's placed over our lives, then part of the government system of us as American citizens is voting.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good point. I haven't thought about it that way.
To not steward that well, I think is not truly honoring to the system that we have. But on the other hand, I don't think it's sinful not to vote, whereas some people would go to that extreme.
Yeah.
I know, according to church tradition, that the church for first 300 or 400 years barred any type of activity in civic life, including serving in the military.
Yeah,
and so and the basis of that was all about allegiance, because once you engage in any type of civic life, then what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position of creating an idol.
Yep.
And so idolatry is bad. Idolatry has gotten, a lot of people throughout the biblical narrative in trouble. It caused a lot of chaos. And so as long as it's not an idol for us, and we can steward it as being a steward, a faithful steward of what God's given us, then I think we should. I don't think we should abdicate our responsibility as civic people.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want me to ask about allegiance?
Or I was just saying, yeah.
Okay. Is it possible for a Christian to be like allegiant to their country? And I mean, I don't know, but this might be too detailed and off the rails, but should a Christian say the Pledge of Allegiance?
We're here.
Here we go.
We've arrived.
This is what you're baiting me towards, right? I think as believers, like we ought to be patriots. I think we ought to support our country. I think we ought to believe for the best. And that's where you sort of have to like go, okay, you got patriotism. What's patriotism? What does that look like? And what does nationalism look like? Mm-hmm. And I think, again, back to the subject of idolatry, your patriotism becomes idolatry if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And when it becomes idolatry, you're into the business of nationalism.
Wow.
And, it was back to Exodus 1. It was Pharaoh's nationalist propaganda that caused him to take the actions against the Israelites that he took, all the way up to throwing the firstborn children into the Nile. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, in Judaism, Second Temple Judaism, when Herod was expanding the Temple Mount, one of the things that he did was he instituted the court of the Gentiles so that the Gentiles actually couldn't get into the Holy of Holies, and so they could only come close enough. Mm-hmm. And that was according to historians, that was a nationalist perspective that he took. And that was where Israel actually failed to be the light to the nations. And there's many theologians that actually look at Jesus's actions in the temple as turning over the money changers, and disrupting that whole system wasn't a protest against the economics, because the economics actually were allowed within the biblical structure. Mm-hmm. It was Jesus was protesting the fact that his house was supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations. Yeah, mm-hmm. And that court of the Gentiles had signs all the way around it. If you go past this point, you will die because you are not a Jew.
Wow.
And so this was a source of their national pride. It was their idolatry. It was the center of their life, and it was the center of their identity as a nation. Mm-hmm. And that was nothing that God ever intended it to be. And so Jesus' protest in the temple was against their nationalism. But it's interesting that in Exodus 1 and also in the cultural context of the New Testament, that sort of nationalist identity sort of drove each nation further and further into idolatry and corruption and violence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's so helpful to point that out, because I've heard a number of people say lately, Christian nationalism is just a leftist boogeyman, modern insult that, they just kind of picked up out of nowhere. But I think what you're showing is like idolatry of your nation, that goes back. I mean, pretty far.
Well, if the Exodus happened 1500, let's just say 1500 BC.
Yeah.
Right. So that's 3,500 to maybe 5,000 years
ago. That goes way back. Yeah. And, I do think, to be fair, I think maybe the term does get thrown around a little too much now. Like some things that are not quite Christian nationalism are being labeled Christian nationalism, but I still think it's a helpful term. Okay, let me ask this other devil's advocate question. As you were talking about, politicians, specifically presidents, to get elected, they never keep their promises. They keep the same issues in play so that they can get reelected and keep their power. I just can hear someone who is really happy with what President Trump has been doing lately. He said he'd deport people. He's supporting people. Yeah. He said he'd shut down the border. And I think we did have like a record few crossings relatively recently. All of the getting rid of government bureaucracy stuff via Doge. So let's not even talk about like whether or not those are good or bad policies or decisions,
right.
But just like I can just hear someone saying like, well, no, he's doing everything that he promised.
That's what his agents are out there talking about. That he is members of Congress all use the same sort of line that he is fulfilling campaign promises.
Yeah.
So,
do you agree? What do you think?
And
how does that fit into the larger like?
My issue
is he different from most presidents in that?
Yes, I think he is actually definitely taking action. The issue that I have is not that he's taking action. I think auditing the federal government is great. It's a great thing.
Honestly, unpopular opinion, I do too.
I don't find anybody who disagrees with that. The issue that I have is that it actually violates the rule of law. And our rule of law is built on due diligence. And everybody, or due process, everybody and everything in the American system has the right to due process.
Yeah.
And the due process, according to the federal government, is that funding is instituted by Congress.
Yeah.
That's the due process. Congress passes a spending bill. They pass the budget. They create the budget. They work with the executive branch to produce whatever the budget's going to be. And they pass the finance of those line items. Basically, they just say we're going to fund this project and that project and this and that, and auditing that, all of that whole process is not a bad thing. But you going in and just saying, okay, we're just going to shut spending down
right
at the Treasury violates the due process of our system.
Yeah, that's true.
And so fulfilling a promise to cut government spending by $2 trillion, that's great, that's admirable. But the system that we live in actually should require the executive branch to do that with the process that our Constitution has set forth.
Yeah.
It shouldn't violate that process. And so to make those changes and make those spending cuts without including Congress would basically be like picking somebody up off the street and taking them straight to jail.
Yeah.
It's monopoly. Monopoly that happens.
Right.
But not in America. America, you if you're indicted or arrested, you have the right to a fair and speedy trial. That's part of the due process. There's an investigation. You have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to make a claim against what's being claimed, and work through the courts. And that's the system that our Constitution has set forth for the law of the land.
Yeah.
So I admire any politician that says, oh, yeah, this is something that I promised. I admire them fulfilling those promises, but I don't admire violating the rule of law to get it done.
Yeah. And would you know more about this than me? So cutting spending that's been pre-approved by Congress, obvious example. What about stuff that Elon Musk is doing, eliminating government jobs? Is that also violating the right process, or is that a gray area?
Well, I think if take the defense budget, right? So the defense budget is approved by Congress, and all of those jobs that work for the Defense Department are under the heading of the Defense Department, the defense funding. So eliminating employees for under the defense budget is a violation of the authority that the Defense Department has over all of those people. In an ideal situation, it would be, hey, we've recognized that these are the positions that we can cut or we can scale back. You make those recommendations to Congress. Congress says, hey, we need to cut the defense budget by $50 billion, which equates to, X amount of people on the payroll. And then it's up to the department heads to figure out who gets the cut or who makes the cut.
Yeah.
Which has happened in the history of the Defense Department. I think it was under the Clinton administration where there was 10% cutbacks per year. And it's hard. And I talked to officers who were colonels and majors and generals at that time in that era who were responsible for making those cuts. But it was actually beneficial to the whole system.
Yeah.
It was hard, but they did it, and they streamlined their processes, and they improved, and they cut the waste, and it's due process.
Yeah. But the new norm of presidents ruling by executive order, which, to be fair to Trump, Biden did more than anyone before.
Yes.
Trump's second term, So that's kind of like the new norm of.
Well, yeah, but that was the first, the executive order first came into existence in the early 20th century, and it was, was it Grover Cleveland? It was first Teddy Roosevelt. He sort of developed the whole idea of the powerful executive branch, and then several presidents have followed in that. And so with every administration, the level of executive authority that existed in the previous term has actually grown and conflated itself to what it is today. Mm-hmm. So it's not actually, I don't think it's something that is specific to President Trump. I think it's just something, it's a tradition that he's carrying in.
Yeah. It's like, it sounds like it's been like a trajectory.
Yeah. And I think at some point the government's going to have to bring that into alignment.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to have to be the Supreme Court that makes some sort of ruling that limits presidential power.
Yeah.
Because we're moving into really an authoritarian state.
Yeah.
Where the president can just issue whatever executive order he wants. And it's the rule of the land. It's the law of the land now.
At least for 4
years.
Yeah. So, okay, we're getting close on our time, but one last question. So, I resonate, very much with your political perspective. It's that very much like we're an outsider, we're exiles, and we call both sides to we critique both sides and call them both to act justly and rule properly. So some might accuse you and me, but I'll just say you. Some might accuse you of what's been called like, I'm sure you have a senior pastor through the last 4 years. Some might accuse you of what I've heard called both sidesism, which is like, I am not going to take a side so that on all these issues so that I don't actually offend anyone or have to or so that no one could ever peg me as partisan so that I can maintain this completely nonpartisan image. And the critique is like, sometimes you have to choose a side. Like it's, conversations always go back to Hitler. We haven't gotten there yet, but let's make sure we sneak it in before we end, like the churches in Germany in the 30s should have taken a side against Hitler with no nuance, no but this and that. It should have been like a bold stance, right? So what do you say to someone who says you're just taking a both sidesism approach and you're not willing to kind of take a harder stance on one side or the other?
Yeah. So really where this fits is within the cultural context that we're currently living in.
Yeah.
Which is we're living in a world where in America, this is an American problem.
Yeah.
It's not a world problem. This is an American problem. In America, there's a growing expectation, and Tim Alberta does this really well, and he proves this point very well in
Kingdom and
the Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. But what we're doing is we're living in an age where people expect their pastor to be another political commentator. And I just reject that.
Wow.
Like wholeheartedly. That's the gospel, the New Testament doesn't call any pastor, well, it doesn't use the term pastor very often, but any overseer or leader or whatever language you have for the people who are called to shepherd the church, there is no political commentation responsibility that they have. There is no cultural engagement that they have. The message of the kingdom and the message of the gospel is that we're citizens of another kingdom.
Yeah.
And so therefore my responsibility as a pastor isn't to engage in the cultural, commentary of the day or to be another voice on the issues. Mine is to direct people in the life of their kingdom citizenship.
So good.
And that's I've been accused of that, and I've been accused you're just not radical enough, or you're not speaking to the LGBTQ plus issue, or you're not speaking to gender identity issues, and you're not speaking to this, and you're just sort of soft on all these issues, it appears. And I said, but if you listen to what I'm speaking to the church, and I'm asking them, and I'm commanding them, drawing them into a life that is laying down their life for the sake of the gospel. They're crucifying themselves daily, and they're following Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're called to be image bearers.
Yeah.
It all goes back to that original theology that I have, is that everything we are to do in this world really is to be a presence representative of God himself.
Yeah.
And that is his character and his nature and his kindness and his love and his compassion. We are to demonstrate that in all facets of our lives. And to depart from that, to talk about, the culture war, and to engage in the cultural moment and even the political talking points and the news circuits, I actually think is beneath the office.
Wow. Wow. Man. Well, Caleb, this has been fun. As always.
It's been great.
Really appreciate you coming on and talking with us about how a Christian ought to engage in politics, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. Thanks for having me.